Welcome back to BoxBox F1 Fantasy with me, Quentin. It's a Wednesday and we're going to have a deep data delving session where we look at and dissect the data from the Australian Grand Prix. Why? Australian Grand Prix was last week. Yes, that is true. But with some data science, we can extract some interesting information that will help us figure out who to include in our fantasy teams this coming weekend, which is a sprint weekend. And just as a reminder, the deadline for this weekend's fantasy lock is Saturday, and that's not qualifying, it's when the sprint race starts. So in my time zone, that will be 5 a.m. on Saturday morning, which is GMT +2. So be sure to check out the fantasy website to see when to lock your team. Time is limited, so we'll only have one free practice session and the sprint qualifying to help us decide who to put in our teams and whether or not we should play limitless or not. But if you're still around, welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel. And we're gonna do some Excel dissecting. I have run some scripts. Well, I've developed and run some scripts, downloaded the publicly available data from different APIs, excuse me, that help data developers and data delvers like myself get all nerdy and get into the data and see what interesting trends we can come up with and basically just figure out who is fast and who's slow. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. So I've got 4 spreadsheets I'm going to look at today. This is going to be quite just a, relaxed chat with your friend over coffee kind of thing and nerd out. So it's not going to be like a super fancy, polished or video, anything like that. But I want to walk you through some interesting statistics that I found, and hopefully it helps you to get a better understanding of what the grid looks like now, what the field looks like with the different constructors, which amongst the drivers looks to be fastest, and who might be someone you want to avoid. Now, if you're ready, let's get into. So the first Excel sheet I've got open here is what I call true race pace. So as you can see here, we've got all our drivers lined up here, and just a small disclaimer before we get into this. Sorry, I just need to take a breath. I'm still getting used to talking to the camera, but here we go. So we've got here, I downloaded all the lap data from the Australian Grand Prix. I excluded virtual safety car laps, pit in, pit out laps as well. So this is quite representative of how quick a driver is without anything funny going on, and this is averaged over the whole race. So, and bear in mind, like, there's some interpretation to be had, slightly different ways that I handle data that might differ from how another data analyst might analyze it. So there might be some small discrepancies between different simulations and different methodologies of analyzing the data. So if you see something's a bit off or different from what someone else has said on social media, it's probably just we use different filtering techniques, chose our laps a bit differently, but my aim is to provide the most accurate, most realistic picture of what is going on. So with that little disclaimer out of the way, we can get into the fun stuff. So we've got a little graph here. Let me just see if I can fit this on properly. Alright, so you should be able to see there. What immediately stands out to me is we've got almost 3 distinct levels here. So we've got the top 6 drivers over here. We've got Antonelli Russell leading the pack. We've got the 2 Ferraris right behind. Then we've got Verstappen snapping away at Ferrari, and then slightly behind we've got Norris. If we see here the delta on the left hand side, we can see the delta between these 6 drivers is quite small. The 2 Mercedes drivers are quite close to each other, there's a small gap between the two Ferrari drivers as well, but they're still very close, within within 16 tenths of Russell. So Leclerc is within 16 tenths of Russell. Hamilton seems to have the slight edge over Leclerc so far. That is also what I saw when I had a look at free practice data from last week, as well as preseason testing. And as we know, Hamilton did finish P1 in the sprint race last year before getting DSQ'd, but it seems like it's a track he does well at. So Hamilton is someone to keep in mind for this race if you want some Ferrari coverage. What's interesting though to me is where Norris is at. That McLaren seems to be going nowhere particularly fast. Unfortunately, we do not have Piastri's data to compare with, but I suspect it would be around about ballpark. Now, from McLaren, we see there's quite a big jump in time. We've got about 8 tenths of a second average lap time difference here. And it's Bortoleto up next. In 7th, we've got Bortoleto. Hulkenberg, we don't have data for, unfortunately, because he did not start the race. But that Audi is very, very sneakily speedy, in my opinion. I mean, it even beat out the Haas by about 1/10 of a second. So, yeah, quite interesting. Quite interesting. And I just realized I made a mistake when I said here. I said 15 tenths of a second. It's more like 15 hundredths of a second. So apologies for that. It is quite late. It's almost midnight when I'm recording this. So please bear with me. And of course, we have Lindblad. That guy looks like he can hook up a fast lap. And even though Lawson wasn't going anywhere particularly fast, he was within 2/10 of a second of his teammate. If we just have a look here, so we've got Lindblad here in 9th, and then Lawson in 11th. And looking at their delta, the difference between the two, they are not that far off from each other. So definitely interesting to keep an eye on. So it seems like these two racing bulls, they are very close to, if not equal to, Haas in terms of speed. If we see here, Behrman's just ahead of Lindblad, but then Ocon is just behind Lawson as well. So between Behrman, Lindblad, and Lawson, Ocon, they kind of balance each other out. So Bortoleto is slightly ahead of Behrman, but Ocon slightly behind Lawson. So very, very close between these two constructors. So interesting. It is going to be interesting to see how they fare as the season progresses. Now, if we have a look what else we've got here. So we've got, I'm just trying to see what else interesting is here to look at. So Colapinto seems to be quite alright here, chugging along nicely. But Gasly certainly seems to have the advantage at the moment. We can see the delta here is about, what's the difference here between them? We've got 1.9, so 0.421, and so looking about like 2.26 hundredths of a second. So about 2.25 seconds of difference between the two of them. Quite a big. Gasly obviously has the advantage of being the more experienced driver, but Colapinto, I think as soon as he gets comfortable in that car, he's going to be challenging higher up the grid. And as Alpine, get more comfortable tuning their Mercedes power unit as well, they're definitely going to be going up in the ranks, in my opinion. And then, of course, Williams, not particularly impressive. They're 14th and 16th. Just scroll a bit over here. So we've got Albon slightly edging out Sainz by about 15 hundredths of a second, so 0.15 seconds, give or take. Their car's just overweight. You can see here the distinct three kind of car levels here. So we've got the clear forerunners here, the big four, up here, very clearly above the rest. And then we've got this kind of like transitionary spot right here with Bortoleto, Behrman, almost like a transition between the rest of between the forerunners and the midfield. So I think Behrman and Bortoleto are the best, or not necessarily the best, but currently the fastest drivers in the midfield. We'll see how if that holds up in China, but that seems to be the trend based on the data we've got now, and it was very similar in preseason testing. That was exactly the same picture that was coming out. Now, if we look here towards the tail end, we can see the Williams is the slowest with the rest of the midfield. And then, of course, Stroll and Alonso. The funny thing is, though, despite the absolute clown show that was Aston Martin in Australia, they still managed, for the laps they did do, their average lap time was faster than Perez and Bottas. Okay, Bottas is not a complete picture because he did not finish the race. Technically, Stroll didn't either, or Alonso kind of, but their average pace is... it's almost incredible to say this, but they are only the second slowest team if you go off purely average lap time. That is of the laps they did complete. So going into the following race weeks, something to bear in mind. I believe that the Cadillacs will hit rock bottom soon, as soon as, if they keep dropping 0.6, they will get to the 3 million floor soon. I don't think they will get there right away because they are scoring some points. Perez at least scored 4 points, I think, last week, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so we've definitely got 3 distinct levels of team here. We've got the big back markers, Aston Martin, Cadillac. Then we've got Williams. Then we've got Alpine, it seems. And then it's a toss-up between the Racing Bulls and Haas. So this is going purely off of race pace. Now, let us switch over to the next Excel sheet here, which is looking at the best lap windows. So similar to let me just open this up here on my screen as well. Yeah, so similar to the true race pace I just looked at, these are averages of their best laps. This is average 3 best laps, 5 and 10, as this obviously suggests. Of course, Hadjar and Bottas did not complete 10 laps, unfortunately. Alonso and Stroll, between the different stints and pit stops, we can say they did manage to set some times. So let's just have a little look here. I wasn't able to do a bar graph for this just yet. Each week I'll try to improve the graphics and the visualization for these videos, so it can help my fellow data nerds to see what's what. Of course, if we just sort this here by smallest to largest, we see an interesting picture here. So the best 3 laps set by Verstappen. And the same also applies. Virtual safety cars are excluded, pitting laps, also extreme outlier laps. I forgot the exact filter I used, but I removed like the fastest and the slowest lap within this average, just to keep those extreme outliers outside of the data, just to try and give us a better real average kind of performance. So Verstappen, best 3 laps put together, Hamilton, then Norris, then Antonelli and Leclerc. Interesting thing about Russell, even if he's here in 6th currently with the 6th when it comes to the best average of 3 laps, best 3 lap average rather, and if we sort here with best 5 laps, he's in 5th, so just 1 place faster. And then if we go here, he stays right about there. So even though he won the race, he isn't necessarily gunning it for each lap. He's not putting in the highest average fastest laps. And at first it wasn't making sense for me. But when I thought about it a little bit and I was digging around on X as well, I forgot who it was, but someone mentioned that Russell seems to be holding back his pace quite a bit. How does he win the race if he's not the fastest average speed? Well, it's because the average speed I'm calculating here discards outliers. So when the driver behind him comes up, in one lap he can open up the gap. Within 1-2 laps, he's got the gap to a comfortable space where he wants it. So it seems like Russell is managing his pace. He's not pushing unnecessarily. He's not trying to win the race by 10, 15 or 20 seconds. He doesn't need to. It's risky. You don't want to push the engine right now. So Russell is probably even further ahead than the data is showing us right now. So just very interesting here. So Russell seems to be like going steady Eddie, and then when he needs to, he pulls out a fast lap or two, or puts in a mega out lap or a mega undercut or overcut lap when he comes in or out the pits. So Russell is a sneaky little guy who's got some more speed up his sleeve. So be sure to check for this trend in the following weeks to come. I'm going to try to have Wednesdays as our data deep dive and dissection session. So I like that alliteration. Yeah. So Antonelli, let's see, where is Antonelli? Where did he go? Okay, 5th here. So let's just filter best 3 laps. Similar thing to Russell, I think. So they aren't necessarily pulling out the most fastest average laps, but they put in the times when it's needed. On the other hand, someone like Verstappen, he is keeping his pace very consistent, as is Hamilton, over more laps. So they don't have as big spikes in their lap times per se, but they hold a higher, more steady average speed, average lap time over the race. And let's just look here at 10. You can see here, Hamilton and Verstappen are very close to each other, within 0.02 of a second of each other. So they seem to be very consistent. One thing that did jump out to me is the tire degradation. I wasn't able to put together a comprehensive picture on the tire deg, but hopefully next week or the race week after, I'll be able to show that in some kind of visual form. And looking here, we can see Alonso, Perez, Stroll still rounding out the bottom here, and we still see this Lindblad, Behrman very close to each other, and then we've got Ocon, but then Lawson is slightly higher here. And if we just compare that with the 5 lap, Lawson is also quite high up here. So Lawson seems to be not necessarily the most overtakey driver, if that is even a word, but it seems like once he finds his pace, it seems like he can put in those consistent times. And I'll show you just a second now how consistent or how close to their average or their mean lap times each driver is. So we'll get to that in just a second if I can find that. Let me just see here. Oh, this was on the previous. I didn't even touch on that. Let me just go back here to true race pace here. So yeah, if we look at consistency here, we can see the least consistent drivers had, of course, because he didn't finish the race. So, but yeah, it seems like the most consistent is here between Leclerc, Norris, Hamilton, these guys over here. And then interesting to see like Perez and Stroll quite up here as well. But this is maybe just because they were just going slow as fast as they could. Yeah, that's it. I'll leave it at that. So, so these guys here seem to be quite consistent. And you can see Lawson up here as well with the consistency very, very high. And yeah, so he's not very fast compared to Russell and Antonelli per se, but he is consistent with the lap times he puts in, and that might help him if there's ever a race where they go for a one-stop strategy and he needs to manage his tires. So as well as Lindblad is slightly less consistent. So he's a little bit more up, down, balance beam, uppy, downy swing, seesawing lap time. Not necessarily bad, but you can see here Lindblad and Tonelli, the newer drivers, and then you've got guys like Hamilton, Norris, Leclerc, which are arguably very experienced. And of course Verstappen as well, but Verstappen is not always the most consistent lap time, because I think he would be higher up if he didn't start so far down the grid. Having to overtake cars definitely slows you down and slightly adds more noise to your average lap time or your consistency. But despite that, he is here in the top 5 most consistent drivers here, or consistently lapping drivers here. So that's also just an interesting statistic I wanted to point out. Fuel normalized race pace. This one is quite interesting. I'm not exactly sure what to make of this just yet. So what this is doing is taking the lap times and adding a normalizing formula to it that tries to simulate the fuel load at about halfway through the race. So right in the beginning of the race, the laps are much slower because they're fully loaded with plus or minus 70 kilograms of fuel. And then at the end of the race, they're obviously very close to 0. So we're taking it about halfway, but with about 35 kgs of fuel. So if we take fuel out of the equation, this is what we come out with, more or less. So we can still see clearly the Mercedes here at the top, but Russell is slightly lower than Antonelli. I'm not sure what to make of this yet. I can't quite figure out exactly why Antonelli would be ahead of Russell. So I'm still trying to figure that out, but I just wanted to show this graph, share this graph with you. So clearly Cadillac still here behind. This is very similar to the true race pace. It's just some are slightly different here for some reason. So I don't know. The only thing I could think of is that one of the drivers maybe used up his fuel slightly more quickly, or used his energy recovery and deployment more efficiently and was then carrying more fuel. For example, here, maybe Antonelli used more fuel and then had to rely on his electrical more for the race, but was still able to keep the lap speed high. I'm not quite sure exactly what we can gather from this, but Mercedes fast, Ferrari fast, Red Bull fast. So interestingly though, here we get a small little sampling of Hadjar's lap time here. So this is where this fuel normalized comes in. So we are simulating what Hadjar's speed would be like about halfway through the race. And we even got Bottas in here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so Bottas is in here as well. We do not have Hulkenberg because he did not actually start the race, but we've got our 20 drivers in here. So I believe, who else is missing here? There's someone missing here, I forgot who's missing. So we've got Hadjar. I can't think of it right now, but yeah. So also Hulkenberg is missing. We're missing one more person. So we've got the 2 Alpines, we've got the Haas, we've got Piastri. That's who else. Yeah, obvious. Okay, so Hadjar here, even though he only completed 9 laps, I believe, if he had gotten to around mid-race, he would have been lapping around 84.5. So a 124.5 as opposed to Verstappen's 124.0. So about half a second between the two teammates, but not super far off from the rest of the top four. Of course, the lap times he did set were with high fuel load, so the normalization formula is not perfect for predicting what the speed would be like or compensating for fuel burn, but this does give us a bit of an idea. So Hadjar, in theory, about a second off of Antonelli as per lap, and then Verstappen about half a second behind. So of course this is all needs to be taken with a grain of salt, but this is interesting data, and I'm sure someone can read more into this than I can. I'm not an expert at statistics. I just like diving into the data and seeing what I can gather from it, and I'm sharing it with all of you. Last thing we're going to look at is our sector analysis. So, who was fastest in which sector? And I'm trying to use this to see what kind of track would benefit each team. And I'm just going to pull up on my screen the Albert Park circuit diagram map. Yes. And let's see here. So we've got sector 1. I'll probably put this up on screen in editing. But so we've got sector 1. We've got straight into that right hand, left hand. Sector 2 is a bit more fast corner-ish, except for turn 6, which is quite of a sharp bend, but the rest is all quite straight line mode. Sector 3 ends on like straight line as well, but it's got a bit heavier braking zones going into turn 11, turn 12, and turn 13 and 14. So sector 3, heavier braking, more energy recovery, and then we've got pretty much fast. Now I've got a right then a left into sector 1. So this will make sense if you just look at the map. But okay, so sector analysis. Let's see who was dominating in sector 1. So Russell, Antonelli, Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton, Norris, and then Bortoleto, quite interestingly. So they're quite up there. They are up there indeed. And Hadjar, okay, slightly behind. So you can see the best sector time was the Mercedes, of course. Nice straight line. They seem to have a bit of a better battery deployment. With sector 1, there's like 2 deployment areas right after each other. So it seems like they were being able to deploy their energy quite efficiently here without running into absolute 0% charge. And sector 2, let's filter by this, see if the picture changes in any form. Yes, so slightly different story here. So we've still got Russell here, but now the Ferraris are very, very close. Look at Hamilton, Leclerc, their sector times, within 1/100th of a second of each other. And Hamilton is within 2/100ths of a second. 4/100ths of a second of Russell. So this sector here is a bit more high speed-ish corners. So what this suggests to me is that they favor the faster, more winding kind of fast corners as opposed to high energy braking zones or something like that. So China, as we know, the Chinese Grand Prix has got some lovely long corners. So I think Ferrari are going to have a slight advantage going into this weekend. And I'll go so far as to say, based on my initial simulations, that Ferrari have a very good chance of actually winning either the sprint or the race. That is granted that Ferrari does not Ferrari with strategy again like they did in Australia, but Ferrari is Ferrari. And to wrap things up, let's just look at sector 3. So we've got Antonelli, of course. Seems like Mercedes dominates in all sectors for some reason. But we've got quite a short sector 3 here. Not super long. But you can see the sector times here. So sector 1 and sector 3 are quite long with lots of straight line, and they also bigger distance. But the short sector 2, which seems to be the same distance almost, but it's a much higher speed. So like I said previously, it seems like Ferrari have an affinity for the high speed corners. So definitely keep that in mind. Sector 3, we've got, like I said, Russell, and then again the 2 Ferraris, and Russell all the way down here in 6th. Norris, not far off here, to be honest. He's within 0.3 of a second from Antonelli. I don't know what McLaren are going to bring to the table this year. They seem to be not on their game 100% yet. I think they are still trying to figure out the Mercedes power unit, how to extract most out of it, and yeah. And I think that is about it. These are the 4 spreadsheets I have brought to the table to share with all of you. If you've found any of these statistics interesting, or you have any questions, or you would like to get your hands on this data or these exact spreadsheets, let me know in the comments, or reach out to me on X or on TikTok, and I'll be sure to get in touch with you. And I thank you so much for watching. It's going to be an exciting weekend. I'm probably going to play Limitless on one team and 3 times on my other team. And for team 3, I will probably just do 2 transfers and see what I can recover. I've had some unfortunate DNFs in my Australia team with Bottas and Hulkenberg respectively, but I think we can still recover. Be sure not to miss any updates, so follow me on X and TikTok if you aren't already. And I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers by the end of this week, before the Chinese Grand Prix weekend starts. So if you like this video, please leave a like, tell the algorithm who else likes this content, and if you would, please consider subscribing. And it's not too late to join my fantasy league yet. Get in there while you can. And tomorrow I'll be coming out with this video. 3 drivers and constructors to avoid. 3 drivers and 2 constructors I would not put in my team for the life of me, and who I would put in instead. So find out who to avoid tomorrow, maybe who you might sub people out for if you've got one of these drivers in your team who might be suitable replacements, and which constructors to avoid or add in. If you were paying attention to this video, you'll likely see that Audi, however you want to say it, is an unlikely hero constructor for fantasy managers. Their pay seems to be legit, and if you are willing to take the risk on their power unit, you might find yourself with a masterful differential play this weekend. Let me know if you are considering doing just that. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow, same time ish, and same place right here. I'll see you next time. This is Quentin from BoxBox F1 Fantasy. A good bye.